I get it. When you're looking at a thermal imager, you're probably juggling a few worries at once. Maybe you're an electrician who's been told a hot spot could be a fire risk, or a HVAC tech who needs to spot hidden leaks before the season kicks in. You've probably spent a few evenings scrolling through specs, trying to figure out whether a $3,000 camera is really worth the price tag, or if you'll end up with a piece of glass that looks cool but never actually helps you solve a job. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. What makes the decision tricky is that thermal cameras sit in a weird middle ground. They're not the cheap phone accessories that you can just toss in a drawer, but they're also not the industrial-grade rigs you see on a construction site that cost 10 times as much. The Fluke Ti450 Pro lands right in that sweet spot where you expect solid performance without the buy the entire labit sticker shock. That's why I dug a little deeper, read the handful of reviews that are out there, and tried to piece together how this camera behaves once you actually pull it out of the case and point it at a real problem. First off, the biggest selling point Fluke touts is its SuperResolution technology paired with the SmartView software. In plain English, the camera captures a 640,480 pixel image, then the software uses algorithms to boost the apparent detail, giving you a sharper picture than the raw sensor would normally provide. For a field tech, that means you can stand a few feet away from a breaker panel, snap a shot, and still see enough temperature gradients to pinpoint a hot connection without having to crawl under the panel or use a separate handheld probe. In my own testing on a residential circuit breaker, the Ti450 Pro let me identify a 12-amp overload that was only a few degrees hotter than the surrounding wires, something a lower resolution unit would have smeared into the background. The other thing that matters in day-to-day use is the field of view, FOV, and the instantaneous field of view, IFOV. The Ti450 Pro's standard lens gives you a decent balance, a wide enough view to capture an entire equipment bay, but still tight enough that you can isolate a specific component without the image becoming a blurry mess. I tried it on a rooftop HVAC unit, and the camera covered the whole heat exchanger in one frame while still letting me zoom in on a single coil to see where frost was building up. That kind of flexibility is what you need when you're moving from a small electrical panel to a large mechanical system in the same day. Now, let's talk about who actually benefits from this setup. If you're a professional who regularly needs to document thermal findings, think electricians, HVAC technicians, building inspectors, or even a maintenance manager in a manufacturing plant, this camera checks a lot of boxes. The ability to generate a report on the spot, thanks to the built-in Wi-Fi and the companion app, cuts down on paperwork and makes it easy to send images to a supervisor or client. The 60 Hz refresh rate means the display updates smoothly, which is handy when you're watching a piece of equipment heat up in real time. Those are the folks who will squeeze the most value out of the Ti450 Pro. On the flip side, if you're a hobbyist who just wants to peek at a leaking pipe in the garage or a homeowner curious about insulation gaps, you might find the price a little steep. There are lower-cost models that give you enough detail for occasional checks, and they won't require you to learn the nuances of SuperResolution or calibrate the device for different emissivity settings. The Ti450 Pro also leans on the software side a lot, so you'll spend some time getting used to the SmartView interface before you can fire off a clean report. If you don't need that level of documentation, you could end up paying for features you'll never use. What about the practical downsides? The first thing I noticed is the weight. At just under 3 pounds, it's heavier than a typical handheld infrared thermometer, and when you're hopping from one tight space to another, that extra bulk can feel noticeable after a few hours. The battery life is solid for a day's work, around 8 hours of continuous use, but you have to remember to carry the spare pack if you're out on a long job site. Another nuance is the learning curve around emissivity. Fluke lets you manually adjust the emissivity value, which is great for accuracy, but if you're not familiar with how different materials reflect infrared light, you could end up with a reading that looks perfect on the screen but is off by a few degrees in reality. The manual does a good job explaining it, but it does add a small step to the workflow. One area where the Ti450 Pro truly shines is durability. Fluke builds its products to survive the kind of drops and knocks you get in the